So you've probably heard that a balanced portfolio needs to contain things like US stocks and international stocks and bonds. And so you've probably heard the term small caps. But what I want to do in this video is talk about small cap stocks and specifically the Vanguard small cap ETF, ticker symbol VB, how you can own this part of the market in one single fund. So let's dive into that together and we'll get started. All right, so welcome back. I am so glad you found my channel. This is Joshua Talks Money, where I, Joshua, talk about all things personal finance. I learned a lot after building and selling my tech company, and now I really focus on investing and passing the lessons that I'm learning and the ones that I've learned onto you right here every week. If that sounds good, please consider hitting the subscribe button and hitting that thumbs up button. It helps me tremendously to get this content out to the people that could benefit from it. Okay, so let's start with small caps. What is a small cap stock? So the well understood definition is that small cap stocks have a market capitalization of under $2 billion. So you think of that small cap meaning market cap, and it's under that $2 billion number. And what that basically means is that you take the share price of a company and you multiply it by the outstanding shares, and that's how you calculate the market capitalization. So these companies are on the smaller side when you compare them to something like Apple, in the trillions of dollars. And that does not mean that they're bad investments though. In fact, there's a lot of opportunity in these companies because they are smaller and perhaps have a long way to go in terms of growth and potential. So let's take a look at Vanguard's fund for investing in this space through an exchange traded fund. And that is the Vanguard Small Cap Index, ticker symbol VB. So this ETF has an expense ratio of 0.05%. And Vanguard weights this as a higher risk portfolio. So high risk, high reward, and mostly because some of these smaller companies, there can be volatility. They're not as well capitalized as someone like Apple or Amazon. There's different challenges that they face in their markets that they compete, and the road to growing out of perhaps the small cap space. And so that can bring its own set of challenges and risks. So VB was established in 2004, and you can see here on the chart, if you were to invest $10,000 just 10 years ago, you would basically be somewhere around 30K today. Okay, so if we jump down to VB's holdings and look at what makes up this ETF, you'll actually see that there's over 1,500 companies, 1,500 stocks that make up this exchange traded fund. And something that I personally thought was interesting is when you look at something like a VTI or a VOO, these have the big mega cap names in there, and those obviously make up a big chunk of the top 10 holdings. In this fund, the top 10 holdings only make up 3%, which is pretty small in comparison to those others. And I think it makes a lot of sense because these are obviously smaller companies. So from a quick glance at the top 10 holdings in VB, I personally only recognized about two right off the bat, which was Brown & Brown, the insurance provider, and then Marathon Oil. Perhaps you recognize some as well. And you'll also see that the sectors that this ETF cover are pretty broad as well. You have the bulk of the investments in the industrial space, but then there's financials and real estate, technology, consumer discretionary, healthcare. These are all making over 10% of the diversification of sectors in the ETF. So I was trying to go through the list of all the holdings in VB and just kind of pull out some small caps that were interesting to me. I'll probably do another video about that, maybe like my favorite small cap companies. But some names that popped up were things like Zynga, the game development company. I've lost many hours of my life playing the games that they put out. And then things like Floor & Decor. So this is a company that sells flooring. I actually did the floor in my home using their materials. And then some other things like CubeSmart. So this is a self-storage chain that I've stored my stuff in before. And it's really interesting. So you see names like that, probably companies you interact with at some point, maybe not every day like your iPhone, but these play a critical piece of our economy here in the US market. So let's also look at historical performance of VB. It's really interesting if we dive into the 1, 3, 5, and 10-year returns, you can see that over 10 years, it was about a 12% return, which is pretty great. And then the 5 year is about 11, the 3 year is 12. But if we jump back just to this last year, the return has been 0.71%. And you could see this in the market if you're paying attention to how companies are moving. Small caps have been really crushed just most recently here in 2022. And that's reflected here on this chart. But overall, since inception back in 2004, the Vanguard Small Cap Index ETF has returned 9.7%. Okay, and so do I own Vanguard's VB ETF? So the answer is I do not directly, right? So I don't actually own shares in this ETF. I instead buy VTIs, you've heard me talk about on this channel. If you haven't watched that video, go ahead and click and you can check that out now. VTI gives me access to these 1,500 plus companies, but it's all within one ETF that has all companies in the US stock market. For me, that's the solution that I've chosen to go with. So I get that exposure without trying to buy and own a bunch of different ETFs. That may change in the future. There is a case that could be made where you want to be heavier in certain parts of the market during certain periods of time. For example, if small caps, as we've seen, have sold off pretty significantly, maybe you want to buy some more exposure to that specific part of the economy. But then that's really where you're getting into timing and trading, and it's not something I mess with, at least right now. All right, so there you have it. That is a quick overview of Vanguard's Small Cap Index ETF VB. If you found this helpful, please consider subscribing. Leave me a comment. I respond to every single one of you and would love to connect. We'll be back here in my next video. I will talk to you then.